Good day. I'm going to talk to you about identifying beings. So let's start with extraterrestrials. Extraterrestrials give off a pretty decent signature that allows us to identify them as intelligent beings that are outside of Earth's atmosphere. So they have a great intelligence of the physical universe and the astral plane, so it's going to really show in their ident, or this energy signature that they give off. A lot of extraterrestrials develop human forms around their astral body so that we are more comfortable around them, and this can make it hard to distinguish them from humans a lot of the times, but you can just ask them to remove their form if they can, and they will if they understand that you're not going to freak out. And also the signature thing, it's kind of a given. After you get used to it, you just detect their intelligence. Also, extraterrestrials seem to be able to phase physical matter in and out of the astral plane, or roughly around the astral plane, and it becomes pretty obvious when they've done this. When you're observing entities, it should be very clear whether or not you're observing their material bodies or their astral body. But with extraterrestrials, it's kind of somewhere in between a lot of the time. So the next thing is immaterial beings. Immaterial beings are very confident in their movements. They move around quite rapidly. They don't have a form even if they're in the RTZ. So they are often going to be points in space that radiate energy in every which way. That makes them look like an orb. Or you'll just see them as spherical. It doesn't really matter. But if they are an orb or sphere-like, then they're probably immaterial. A lot of times you're going to perceive forms falsely around other entities to make sense of them, but this lessens in time and experience. Also, immaterials are pretty interested in our energies that we are subject to in the physical universe. Some beings, of course, are not or have never been bound to a material body before. They're not used to giving a single body constant attention and being subject to very explicit set in stone energetic behaviors and constant input. So they'll be very interested when you bring this up. They're not going to understand it fully, but you bring it up and they'll be like, oh, that's pretty cool. I want to experience that. Another thing that I forgot to mention about immaterial beings is that they don't understand the idea of property. They'll come into your house and they'll have no idea that the house is your property. It's kind of like your safe haven. They don't really care. Well, they would care if they knew, but they don't really know about that stuff. Even a material being who is part of a civilization that doesn't behave like we do might not be familiar with property and such. Next, there's humans. So humans have social, religious, and physical influences. You can feel their influences or conditioning in the astral plane. You often see other humans or these entities grounded. They move along the ground and they don't pass through energies like the walls of physical matter, even though you're not really in the physical universe. And they have weird social and religious expectations a lot of the times. They try to communicate with culture specific languages, and they're just terrible astral projectors compared to all the other types of beings out there. And that's how you can identify them as human. Of course, they're also going to have a really defined human form. Next, you have beings that are from a different material world. So this one's a bit trickier. With humans, you can often see them or feel how they're influenced by their conditioning, like how humans are walking on the ground in an astral projection when they can just fly around freely. Well, you get the same kind of effect with beings from different material worlds, except their influences aren't going to make sense. So they have these influences that aren't social or religious or anything like that. It's an influence from an explicit energetic behavior that they are bound to, and it's not going to make any sense at all. It's going to be very abstract when you're around them. It's just a weird behavior that you can feel that they are subject to in a different body, and you can ask them about it and they'll often bring up something that just doesn't make sense, but you'll understand that it's an immersive environment or immersive material world like ours, just with different behaviors. Ghosts are pretty easy. Ghosts are going to have a rough humanoid form around them. Unless they were deceased very recently, then they would have a very defined humanoid form around them. And they're very disturbed. They do things over and over again. they're latched on to specific spots or items in the physical universe. They say things over and over again. They have compulsions and tics and are trying to get attention from live humans and other entities. And that's pretty well ghosts for you. Identifying other astral projectors is pretty easy because you can ask them if they're currently alive, if they have a human body, and they'll simply say yes or no. And this assumes that you've identified them as humanoid, like they have a human figure around them and behave roughly like a human. And you can ask them where on Earth they are, and they'll be like, oh, I'm from New York or whatever. They usually say a city or a state. And that is all for today. See you next time.